What if the man pouring your morning tea was planning your death? I used to think betrayal came in loud moments, screaming matches, slammed doors, dramatic exits. But sometimes it arrives quietly, like a soft clink of ceramic on the kitchen counter, like a steaming mug held out by the man who promised to love and protect you, made you something special. "Dear Trevor," said, placing the cup in front of me. His voice was just a little too cheerful. He had that forced brightness that had become his new normal. Fake, glossed over. My stomach nodded before the tea even touched my lips. The smell hit me first, bitter, almost metallic. Nothing like the calming herbal blends I usually preferred. "You're so kind," I said, forcing a smile even as dread crawled up my spine. I didn't drink, not yet. "My name is Dana Wilkes. I'm 43 years old, and I've been married to Trevor for 8 of those years. We live in a modest 2-story house just outside Charlotte, North Carolina. By day, I work as a quality control manager at Sunnendale Financial. I deal in facts, precision pattern recognition. And what I saw that morning, what I felt, didn't sit right. Part of the unease came from our new house guest. Trevor's younger brother, Kenny, had been living in our spare room for the past 3 months after being kicked out by yet another girlfriend. He wandered into the kitchen that morning, shirtless, wearing basketball shorts, and that same smug grin he always wore when he was about to say something awful. "Morning, Dana," he said, yawning exaggeratedly as he grabbed a mug. Still drinking that fancy health crap, I didn't bother responding. That was Kenny's thing, constant jabs, casual disrespect. At 35, he still acted like a frat boy who'd never quite made it out of the dorms. I couldn't count the number of times he'd mocked my job, my routines, my type A energy, as he called it. But worse than his behavior was Trevor's response, passive laughs, brushing it off, never defending me. And lately, he'd started echoing some of Kenny's lines. Trevor poured Kenny a cup from the same teapot. But there was something about the way he did it, hurried, almost reluctant. His movements didn't match his cheery tone. "Actually, I made this blend special for Dana," he said without looking at me. "It's supposed to help with stress." Stress. The word landed heavy in the air. Stress was practically stitched into my life since Kenny arrived. Loud nights, disappearing food-missing packages, whispered conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. Stress, huh? Kenny snorted as he sat next to me at the island. "Maybe if you weren't so uptight all the time, you wouldn't need magic potions." I bit the inside of my cheek. I'd learned to stay quiet. Speaking up only gave them fuel. Trevor always got defensive when I challenged his brother like I was the one creating problems. As Trevor turned his back to put the teapot away, I made a quiet, calculated move. I slid my mug toward Kenny and nudged his toward me. "Oops, swap them," I said lightly, handing him the one that was meant for me. He didn't blink, just took a long sip like it was soda. "Tastes weird," he muttered, but he kept drinking. Trevor turned around and froze. His eyes locked on Kenny, then flicked to me, then back again. His shoulders stiffened, jaw clenched, panic flashing beneath the surface of his face like a man who just watched his entire plan start to unravel. I took a sip from the swapped mug, just plain black tea. Nothing herbal, nothing strange. Trevor kept glancing at us, back and forth, over and over. I could almost hear the gears grinding in his head. His plan wasn't unfolding the way he'd hoped. The truth, our marriage hadn't always felt like this. We'd met at a corporate mixer 5 years ago. He was still working at Driftline Construction back then, and I actually admired him. He said he respected my ambition, loved how I could spot a mistake in a spreadsheet from 20 feet away. "You're the smartest person I've ever met," he told me once. "I don't know how your brain does what it does, but all that changed about a year ago when he lost his job. Downsizing, they said." After that, Trevor seemed to shrink into himself. He drank more, talked less, stopped looking me in the eye, and when Kenny showed up 3 months ago, it was like the two of them slipped into a world where I was the problem. Kenny never liked me. From the beginning, he called me uptight, bossy, too corporate. At family events, he made jokes about how I whipped Trevor into shape or how Trevor used to be fun before Dana came around. and Trevor laughed every single time. But lately it felt more targeted, more sinister. Kenny had been dropping lines like, "Trevor, you could have done better," or "life insurance policies are wasted on boring people." That last one made me freeze when I heard it, because just a week earlier I'd opened a piece of mail addressed to Trevor, something about a recently increased policy on me. That was when I started keeping records. I'm a quality control manager after all. I know the value of documentation. I started small, notes, dates, times. Then came the audio recorder in my purse. Then the baby monitor app paired with a mic hidden under the couch. I never told anyone, not even Jessica, my old college friend who now worked as a paralegal. But I did ask her some very careful, very hypothetical questions about legal evidence, marital assets, and criminal intent. And that morning, that tea, was the moment I knew I wasn't being paranoid. I was being hunted. And now Kenny had just swallowed the bait his brother laid out for me. But the real shock was still to come. Kenny leaned back in his chair, groaning as he wiped his mouth. "This stuff really does taste like shti," he mumbled. Trevor laughed weakly, his voice cracking. "It's an acquired taste. Maybe drink some water." "Nah, I'm good." Kenny waved him off. "Takes more than bitter tea to knock me down." But Trevor's hands were shaking now. I watched him fidget, scratching at his jaw, tapping his fingers against the counter eyes, never fully meeting mine. My own heartbeat was steady. Years of performance reviews, high-stakes audits, and fraud detection had trained me well. He didn't know that. He thought I was just his paranoid wife sipping stress relief tea. He didn't realize the storm I'd been preparing behind that tight smile. Roughly 20 minutes later, the first wave hit Kenny. "Oh, shh," he gasped, clutching his abdomen. Sweat began to bead across his forehead. What the hell?" He staggered up, knocking over the mug. Tea splashed across the marble as he stumbled into the living room and collapsed on the couch, groaning. His face was pale, his lips already tinged gray. Trevor rushed to his side, nearly tripping over the bar stool in his panic. "What's happening to him?" I asked, pretending to panic but keeping my voice calm, just breathless enough. Trevor's face was white as chalk. "Maybe he ate something bad, Kenny. What did you eat last night?" Kenny was barely coherent. "Just leftovers." Jesus, Trevor, what was in that tea? The room went dead silent. That was the moment. Right there. When everything Trevor thought he had control over cracked. I reached into my pocket and tapped my phone's screen, starting the voice recording app. "Trevor," I said quietly but clearly, "what exactly was in that tea you made for me?" He opened his mouth, but no words came out. I stared at him, unblinking. His silence was louder than anything Kenny had said. He knew, and now I knew he knew. Kenny whimpered. "Call an ambulance." "Already on it." I dialed 911. "Yes, my brother-in-law's having a medical emergency. He's experiencing intense abdominal pain, nausea, sweating, and trouble breathing. He recently consumed a homemade tea." I made sure the dispatcher heard every keyword. I made sure my phone's microphone picked it all up. As Trevor hovered over his brother, I walked to the kitchen. I opened the drawer, pulled out a clean Ziploc bag, and preserved the mug Kenny had been drinking from. I also grabbed the teapot and sealed it tight. Evidence. Controlled. Isolated. Tagged in my head just like I'd been trained to do at Sunnendale. "Dana, what are you doing?" Trevor asked, breathless. I didn't even flinch, making sure the doctors know exactly what Kenny consumed. They'll want to test everything. The ambulance pulled up 5 minutes later, sirens low but urgent. Behind it, a black and white police cruiser. The responding officer, Martinez, explained it was standard protocol in potential poisoning cases. Trevor swallowed hard when the paramedics started asking him about ingredients. I offered to speak privately with Officer Martinez. I think I said carefully, "You should know my husband made that tea for me," but it was accidentally consumed by his brother. Trevor's head snapped toward me. "Dana, sir," the officer cut in. "We'll need to take a statement." As Kenny was wheeled into the ambulance, I caught Trevor's arm. My voice was soft but sharp enough to cut glass. The truth has a way of coming out. His lips parted to protest, but nothing came. Just fear. At the hospital, the waiting room was bright and sterile. I sat with my purse in my lap, digital recorder still rolling. Trevor was pacing, sweating more than Kenny had. The police had taken our initial statements, but I knew they'd be back. And then came the doctor. "Mrs. Wilkes," he said, "your brother-in-law is stable. For now. But I need to inform you his blood work shows dangerously high levels of ethylene glycol." I nodded, feigning confusion. "I'm sorry, what does that mean?" "Antifreeze," the doctor said grimly. "He's been poisoned." Trevor crumpled into the nearest chair like the air had been knocked from his lungs. I sat straighter. "Oh my God," I whispered. How is that even possible? Antifreeze is a sweet-tasting substance which makes it especially dangerous in beverages. But in this case, the doctor continued, there appears to have been something added to mask the taste, likely a bittering agent. Deliberate tampering. We've already notified law enforcement. Trevor was gray now, sweating through his shirt, silent. I reached over, took his trembling hand, and gave it a reassuring squeeze. "Honey, this is all so horrible." He didn't know the worst was still coming, because I had more, much more. And the truth I'd uncovered wasn't just shocking, it was calculated. But the real betrayal hadn't even been exposed yet. The thing about manipulators is that they never think you're paying attention until it's too late. While Trevor sat in the hospital's sterile waiting room pretending to be a worried brother, I was already 4 steps ahead. I wasn't just Dana, the anxious wife, anymore. I was Dana, the quiet witness, the collector of receipts, and now the woman holding all the cards. Detective Sarah Cross arrived less than an hour later. She had sharp eyes and a clipped voice that told me she'd seen too many lies, too many families torn open like this. She introduced herself as lead investigator. I stood immediately. "We want to help in any way we can," I told her, my voice quivering just enough. Trevor stayed seated, staring at the floor. Detective Cross cut straight to the point. "Mr. Wilkes, is it true you prepared the tea that your brother consumed this morning?" Trevor hesitated. I made it, yes. But it was meant for Dana. The cups must have gotten mixed up." I turned to look at him slowly, my face neutral. The detective raised an eyebrow. "So you're saying the poison was intended for your wife?" Trevor's eyes widened as he realized his blunder. "No, I didn't know it was poisoned. Maybe someone broke in. Or it was contaminated." His voice cracked. His lie was unraveling fast. Detective Cross turned to me. "Mrs. Wilkes, did you notice anything strange about the tea?" I nodded thoughtfully. It smelled metallic, bitter. That's why I hesitated to drink it, and why I swapped it with Kenny's by mistake. The search of our house began immediately. It yielded exactly what I expected, a half-used bottle of antifreeze in Trevor's workshop, his fingerprints on the cap, and his laptop's search history littered with disturbing queries. How to disguise poison taste, ethylene glycol symptoms, and natural-looking accidents. But they hadn't found the most important pieces yet, because I'd hidden them. That night at the station, I sat across from Detective Cross in a small, windowless room. The digital recorder in my purse was replaced with a quiet resolve. "I need to be honest with you," I began, voice trembling. "I've been scared for weeks now." Cross leaned forward. "Go on. My husband hasn't been the same since he lost his job, and his brother Kenny has been making awful comments about how I'm controlling how Trevor can't live his best life because of me. Last week, I overheard them talking about my life insurance policy." I let the words hang. The detective nodded slowly. "Do you have any proof of that?" Without hesitation, I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Kenny's voice came first. "People die all the time. You never know, wrong drink, wrong step, too much stress." Then Trevor's voice. "I just need the right moment. Something natural. Something no one questions." Cross's face changed immediately. Jaw tightening, eyes sharpening. "There's more," I said softly. I reached into my purse and retrieved a small brass key. There's a safe in my home office. It contains printed emails, screenshots, and more audio recordings. I wasn't sure anyone would believe me until now. She took the key like it was a detonator, and it was. That safe contained weeks of evidence Trevor's increasing online purchases of unusual supplements browser tabs left open on poisoning techniques and email conversations with Kenny that hinted at solving our Dana problem. One chilling message read, "I'll handle it. She drinks tea every morning, it won't be hard." Detective Cross leaned back, exhaling. "You realize, Mrs. Wilkes, this is attempted murder." "I do," I whispered. "And I think there's more." I told her about the package I accidentally opened, a letter confirming an increase to my life insurance policy, signed by Trevor. When I asked him about it, he claimed it was just precaution, but paired with Kenny's increasingly bold comments about how Trevor deserved a fresh start, it painted a picture that was impossible to ignore. And then I added, I started having memory issues, fatigue. I thought it was work stress. But now I wonder. Cross looked at me carefully. "You think he's been drugging you?" "I do." Later forensic testing would confirm it. Trace amounts of a prescription sleep aid had been found in my coffee mug. The same medication Trevor had filled just weeks before under the guise of trying to sleep better. The dosage was low enough to confuse, not kill. But consistent exposure could make me seem paranoid, unstable. The groundwork for a larger plan. He hadn't just tried to poison me that morning. He'd been doing it slowly for weeks. The anti-freeze that was Plan B, because I hadn't collapsed fast enough for his liking. But what he never counted on was that I was watching. Every move, every word, every sip. And now the mask had slipped. Trevor wasn't just a man under pressure. He was a man exposed. But the courtroom would be where everything came crashing down. Court isn't always about drama. Sometimes it's about patience, precision, letting the silence speak louder than the shouting ever could. Detective Cross retrieved the evidence from my safe that same night. The emails, the recordings, the receipts, everything I'd been quietly collecting while playing the doting, overwhelmed wife. She didn't say much at first, but I could see it in her eyes. This wasn't the first time she'd seen a woman stalked by the man who swore to protect her. But maybe it was the first time she'd seen one so meticulously prepared to strike back. That's what Trevor never understood. He thought he was the mastermind, but he never realized he was just a poorly written formula full of holes I could audit in my sleep. While the detectives combed through our house again, I sat outside on the porch with a blanket over my shoulders. The same porch where I used to drink tea and pretend everything was fine, where I used to listen to Trevor tell stories about the old days when he still believed he was the man in control. It was quiet now. The kind of quiet that feels like breathing after drowning. Inside, they found more than even I had known. In the back of Trevor's workshop, tucked behind a false panel, they found notes pages from a spiral-bound notebook filled with scribbled timelines, calculations, and what he'd arrogantly titled the Clean Exit Plan. It outlined my work schedule, my health insurance status, even ideas on stress-induced heart attack strategies. Next to it, a bottle of crushed sleep pills and a burner phone with deleted messages between him and Kenny. "You said there was only one policy," Detective Cross told me when she returned. "But we found 2 life insurance policies taken out in your name, one through your employer and a private supplemental policy Trevor applied for online. It doubled the payout if your death was ruled accidental." I froze. I hadn't known about the second one, but Trevor had. And he'd been planning his new life to start the moment mine ended. By the time we reached the courtroom, Trevor looked like a shadow of the man I married. Gone was the confident smirk. Gone was the relaxed body language. He sat hunched beside his lawyer, hollow-eyed and jittery. The courtroom was full reporters, local neighbors, and surprisingly a few women from the domestic support group I'd quietly joined weeks before. I hadn't told them details then, but they had pieced it together now, and they were here in silent solidarity. The media had already dubbed it the anti-freeze murder plot. That name stuck fast, circulating through every TV channel and online blog, and Trevor. He became the face of the man who smiled while stirring a deadly cup of tea. In the witness box, I told the truth. Not with drama, not with tears, just with details, dates, times, quotes. You see, Trevor always mocked me for caring too much about details, for highlighting inconsistencies in our bills, for remembering what someone said 3 weeks ago, for being, as he called it, a buzzkill of a human spreadsheet. But those details, they were the reason I was still alive. I explained how I used a baby monitor app to record late-night conversations, how I stored printouts and recordings in a locked safe, how I kept a backup of everything in Jessica's office just in case. You planned this, Trevor's lawyer accused. You manipulated this situation to frame him. No, I said, my voice calm. I planned to survive it. The prosecution unveiled everything methodically. The digital searches, the burner phone, the anti-freeze bottle with Trevor's prints, the forged signature on the second policy. But it was the audio recordings that silenced the room. When Kenny's voice played joking about accidents, followed by Trevor's response, "We just need the right moment." There was an audible shift. The air thickened. Even Trevor's lawyer couldn't hide the slump in his shoulders. When I testified about how I switched the cups that morning, some people gasped. But I didn't do it for drama. I did it because I needed proof. I needed them to drink the plan they'd brewed for me. And when Kenny took the stand, recovering but frail, he told them everything. That he had pressured Trevor to do something about me. That Trevor was the one who ordered the antifreeze and did all the research. That he went along with it because he was desperate, broke and tired of sleeping in our guest room. I didn't think he'd actually do it, Kenny said, his voice trembling, but he kept saying she controlled everything. That he needed out. That once she was gone, he'd have the freedom and the money. In that moment, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt sick. Because this was my husband, a man I once trusted with my life, a man who had cooked me breakfast, kissed my forehead, laughed with me on vacations, and he'd spent months plotting my death like a project timeline. The judge didn't speak for a long while after the closing arguments, and then, with finality, he delivered the sentence 25 years for attempted murder. 5 years for Kenny as an accessory, and just like that, it was over. But my revenge, that was just beginning. The courtroom fell silent as the judge's gavel echoed against the walls. Trevor didn't even flinch. He just stared straight ahead like a man whose entire future had slipped through his fingers in real time. His face was gaunt, eyes sunken, lips pale. Whatever fantasy he'd built of escaping with a payout and a clean slate had evaporated under the harsh fluorescence of reality. And me, I just sat still, composed in a navy blouse and blazer, my posture straight, my gaze steady. The same calm I used to audit ledgers and catch errors no one else noticed was now guiding me through the final act of a life he tried to end. I watched as the bailiff cuffed Trevor gently, guiding him out of the courtroom like a broken puppet. Kenny sat further back, head hung low, surrounded by family members who refused to meet my eyes. He'd taken a deal 5 years in exchange for full cooperation. It wasn't enough for what he did, but it was enough to bury Trevor. The media camped outside the courthouse, microphones and lenses thrust forward the moment I stepped onto the sidewalk. "Ms. Wilkes, how did you know?" one reporter shouted. "Did you ever suspect your husband?" I paused, the cool autumn wind brushing across my face. I didn't suspect, I said. I knew, because I paid attention. That soundbite made the evening news. They called me the T-widow who refused to die. They spun headlines around anti-freeze betrayal and the wife who flipped the script. And as strange as it felt to be the center of such public attention, I didn't shy away. Because the more people who heard my story, the more women might stop second-guessing their gut instincts. Trevor's defense attorney had tried to paint me as controlling, overbearing, a wife who emasculated her husband until he snapped. But the jury didn't buy it, because I had the recordings, the search histories, the receipts, and I had the calm, undeniable poise of someone who had lived every day under a ticking clock and still come out alive. What shook Trevor most wasn't the sentence. It wasn't the media storm, the public disgrace, or even losing his family who cut ties the moment the evidence became public. What destroyed him was realizing how long I'd known, how I'd let him build the fantasy that he was in control, how I'd let him believe he was clever enough to get away with it. During my testimony, I looked him dead in the eyes and said, "My husband always underestimated me. He thought I was just a meticulous, controlling wife. But it's those very traits he mocked my attention to detail my intuition, my so-called rigidity, that saved my life and exposed his crimes." The look on his face when I said those words, it was the exact moment his ego broke. Trevor had always relied on charm, on people not looking too close, on brushing off his mistakes with half smiles and half truths. But in that courtroom, charm couldn't save him. Evidence could, and I had plenty. The prosecution laid out every piece: the 2 life insurance policies, the emails to Kenny, the bottle of antifreeze with his prints, the internet searches on how to mimic accidental poisoning, the recordings of conversations in which he and Kenny openly discussed opportunities for accidents. But the most damning moment came when the prosecution played the audio clip where Trevor said, "If she slips up, it's on her. I'm just helping fate along." That one sentence sealed his fate. It was premeditated. It was malicious, and it was caught on tape. Back home, I stood in the now empty kitchen, the same one where he'd poured poison with a fake smile and let the silence sink in. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I had to fake anything. I didn't have to smile through clenched teeth or double-check the smell of my tea. I was free. I sold the house a month after the trial ended. Too many memories clung to the walls, dark ones. I bought a small cottage outside Charlotte surrounded by quiet woods and garden space. My new place had no ghosts, just soil, sun, and the occasional deer in the backyard. I planted herbs, real herbs: lavender, lemon balm, chamomile. I brewed my own tea now. No more surprise blends from people with hidden agendas. Back at Sunnindale, I returned to work with quiet dignity. My boss welcomed me with flowers and a discreet offer of promotion to senior quality control manager. I accepted, because what nearly killed me was also what saved me. My ability to spot inconsistencies, my habit of tracking patterns, my unwillingness to ignore my instincts just because someone called me difficult. Those qualities, the ones Trevor mocked and Kenny hated, they made me unkillable. And I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to help others survive it too. But my story wasn't just about justice. It was about power, the kind you reclaim when everyone thinks you're weak. 6 months later, I stood on the courthouse steps again, this time not as a victim, not even as a witness, just as myself, Dana Wilkes, survivor, strategist, and the woman who lived to tell the story no one thought would ever be heard. Justice had been served, but the real revenge that came slowly, quietly, like healing after a deep cut, the kind no one else can see, but you feel every time you breathe. Trevor was now serving a 25-year sentence. Kenny had taken a 5-year deal, and according to local news, had been transferred to a state facility just outside Asheville. Neither had reached out. Not that they could. But still, I checked the mailbox every day just to be sure no letter slipped through. I wasn't scared, just vigilant. The media coverage had faded, but not entirely. The antifreeze widow became a kind of dark cautionary tale. I received messages from women across the country. Some were just kind words, others desperate questions, asking how I knew, how I acted, how I got away alive. I answered every one of them, because my real revenge wasn't just Trevor's prison sentence. It was turning my survival into someone else's blueprint. I joined a local support group for domestic abuse survivors. At first, I just sat and listened, but when I finally spoke, the room fell silent. I told them everything. About the tea, the life insurance, the recording app, the baby monitor tucked under the couch. But what moved them most wasn't the evidence. It was when I said, he thought I was too controlling, too sharp, too rigid. But those exact things are what saved my life. One woman, tearful and quiet, whispered, "They always call us crazy until we prove we're right." We nodded together. That group became my purpose. I helped launch a program through Sunningdale's Community Outreach Fund, a grant for women trying to escape financially manipulative partners. I helped others build their own safes of evidence, their own escape folders, their own tea-swapping instincts if it ever came to that. Meanwhile, my little cottage flourished. Each morning, I brewed my own tea, lemon balm and rosemary, sometimes a pinch of mint from the back garden. No bitterness, no metallic aftertaste, just peace. The rooms were small but sunlit. My desk faced a window now, not a blank wall. And every afternoon, I took long walks without glancing over my shoulder, because the only danger that had ever truly threatened me was behind bars and powerless now. What Trevor never understood, what men like him always underestimate, is that you don't have to raise your voice to fight back. Sometimes you just raise your standards and raise your guard, and when the time comes, you switch the cups. I still think about that morning, about how easily I could have taken a sip without thinking, about how close I came to becoming another tragic obituary. Wife collapses, suddenly death, ruled accidental. But that's not my story. My story is this. A woman saw the cracks in the life she built and didn't ignore them. A woman watched her husband shift from loving to lethal and documented every red flag until they formed a wall of truth. A woman turned her trauma into strategy, her grief into purpose, and her control into power. I didn't just survive, I shattered the lie, and now I help other women do the same. So if you're watching this, if you've ever felt that sick pit in your stomach, when something didn't add up, when someone laughed too hard at your instincts or tried to rewrite your reality, listen to me. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're not overreacting. You're just seeing the truth before anyone else is brave enough to name it. Keep the receipts. Trust your gut. And when they pour you tea, watch their hands more than their words. Because sometimes the quietest revenge is letting them drink the cup they brewed for you.